Welcome, everybody, to What the Tech. This is a special end-of-the-year edition of What the Tech. The best of 2011 in technology. I'm Andrew Zarin. I'm joined by Paul Thurrott, as I am each and every week. How you doing, Paul?
Good. How are you?
Very good. We got distracted a little bit before the show.
Yes, we did.
With the latest Xbox Verizon Fios TV news. So it's out. Before we go into the best of 2011 for technology, it got released right now. I mean, just minutes ago.
Literally, just minutes ago, yeah.
And what do you think of it so far?
I think it looks pretty good. I mean, it's not a replacement for cable, of course, and it requires cable, so I guess it doesn't work without it. But video quality is like okay to decent, depending on what channel you're looking at. Some of them are SD, some of them are HD. The HD stuff looked pretty good. There aren't that many channels yet, but at least there is live TV. Some live TV. That's something you won't see on some of the other cable providers, like Comcast, for example. There's no on demand yet, although I guess that's coming, and of course more stations are coming.
Yeah, I haven't. I just saw it as we were going live, and I said, "Oh, I wonder if Paul knows." But I did get my Google TV update finally.
You're right on the right on the leading edge there.
Yeah. I'm about two months behind, but long story short, I absolutely hate it. So that says it all.
I'm Google TV, that is.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it.
Why do you hate that?
I didn't, to be honest, I didn't use it for a long time, the new update, but the whole app thing, I thought I would love it, and I really don't.
It reminds me of, remember I talked about that Yahoo TV widget thing I have on my TV?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Yeah.
It's actually like that. The apps show up at the bottom of the screen. It doesn't take over the whole screen. I mean, it can in other circumstances, but you can just bring it up kind of on the bottom. It's okay.
Yeah, so this show...
It's just yet another one of those things.
Thing.
Yeah.
Today's show, we are going to concentrate on the best tech product, news, anything that pretty much had to do with technology that we covered here on What the Tech and on Tech News Weekly and all our other shows. We're going to concentrate on the best of this year, this episode. Next week, we're going to do the worst of, and the worst of will be a drinking show.
That'll be more fun.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. You know what was difficult? I was doing the best of. I'm like, I hate everything. I'm like, why can't we just do the worst stuff for 2 weeks? Because I have enough material for 2 weeks. I'm sure you felt the same when you were doing.
Yeah, coming up with the best of is tough because, these things are all subjective. But it's you have to come up with stuff that came out this year that made a big impact. Yada yada.
Yeah.
Problem. And then, but like finding stuff I don't like, no problem. We could do entire shows about that.
So let's start off with mobile. Again, every year seems to be the year of mobile. And this year, mobile took a different turn because we actually saw the iPad 2 came out. And in my opinion, best tablet out there.
Yep.
And we pretty much saw it single-handedly kill the netbook. In my opinion. I don't know if you agree with that.
Mine too, yeah. Because I think once you hit the $500 price range, you can make this argument that a good netbook, which might cost $400 to $500, versus an iPad, and you think about the types of things that those people are going to be doing.
Yeah,
it's either one could do the job.
Yeah, you still have a difficult time, viewing video on a netbook and and so on. I know that
there aren't many netbooks that get over 8 hours of battery life.
No. I think
the iPad is one of those things. I mean, there are silly things you can do with an iPad. Harry McCracken wrote this article about how he is now using his iPad for 80% of all of his productivity work. That's not just ludicrous; it's like dangerously stupid.
Yeah.
But that's not. Most people don't need to generate content every day. Most people want to check email. They want to browse the web. They want to check up on Facebook and do things like that.
And it's good enough. I mean,
it's not just good enough. It's actually very good. I would say, and that's the big thing. A year ago, a year and a half ago now, when the iPad came out, I was very critical of the original iPad because it was hard at the time to envision why a device that was basically a big iPod Touch was such a big deal. Plus, I was coming from several years of experience with, Windows-based tablet PCs. Kind of been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
But in typical Steve Jobs / Apple fashion, I think the neat thing about the iPad is that they have always been able to look at things a different way and sort of see new markets for what they are well before anyone else can, including me, of course. And there's an interesting passage in the Steve Jobs biography where he was saying that Steve Jobs was very burned by the critical remarks about the first iPad, about how it was a consumption device. And the reason he was bothered by that was because he felt like the criticism was accurate. And so one of the things he wanted to do for the second version was make sure that this thing could be used to create content as well. And one of the things that Apple did along those lines was create those the iWork apps. Mm-hmm. And you can, of course, attach, if you want to, you can attach a keyboard and do all that stuff. So, the iPad 2 is, typical. It's like evolutionary compared to the first iPad. I mean, the first iPad was in many ways the revolution. But I think the big deal is that here we are, it's a year and a half after the first iPad, almost 2 years really after they announced it. And we only now have sort of competition for it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, dozens of devices, none of which compete really in any way.
I don't think any of them are real. They're taking something from the market share, but it's such a small percentage. I don't think it's really competing at all with what the iPad is doing.
Yeah, I guess what I meant by that was not that there is a device that is a one-to-one competitor, but rather that there are a handful of devices that can pull users away. That some people may not buy an iPad because this thing exists. It doesn't mean that there's a device out there that is just as good as an iPad for everything that the iPad does, because there isn't.
Would you call it the best, I guess, consumer product of the year, the iPad 2?
The best consumer product of the year. Yes, but with a caveat. I mean, the problem with the iPad, and it's a very serious problem, is the price. It's still too expensive.
Yeah, $500-$600. That's a lot.
$500, $600, $700, $800. Right?
Yeah,
$830 for the high-end version. $500 is out of bounds for consumer purchases. It's just too expensive, and it's. I hesitate to say perfect because there's no such thing. I mean, and we know next year they're going to come out with one that probably has a Retina display.
And it's even better than
Of course, and that's the way the world works. But in this day and age, for me personally, I would prefer to have a 7-inch device. I think they should have a range of sizes and so forth. But I think we're going to get there. So Apple does things in their own fashion.
Do you think there'll be a 7-inch iPad?
I think when you look at the iPhone and the iPod Touch and you look at the iPad, naturally you can see that there could be a device right in the middle. And that it would make a lot of sense to me that if Apple was going to release a Retina version of the iPad, like an iPad 3 with a very high resolution display, that they could also at that time release a 7-inch version of the iPad that would have the resolution of today's iPad, but in a smaller package. Thus
but what would they
also
price
Retina
it at?
Style, dot per inch.
I mean, the issue is that the iPod Touch is what, $199 now, right? So
yes,
I guess the entry level iPod Touch, you would have to put it for sure at the $299 price range for an entry level 7-inch.
Right, and you could make it well. So here's the thing. So I'm saying that the iPad is too expensive.
Okay.
Today, that's my opinion, but whatever. If the iPad was more powerful, if it had more computing power, if it had more functionality along the lines of it being a computer. In other words, if Apple came out next year and they said, you know what? We have established a new market. We intend to make this thing a mainstream computing device, and we are going to enhance it in the following ways. And they do whatever they do. But they still sell this device that has the same amount of memory. Maybe it has a higher resolution screen, but it has connectivity beyond that, which is available on the current iPad. Now $500 doesn't look so bad, right? Because Apple's computers all start at $1,000 and higher for the most part, except for the Mini. And $500 and up all of a sudden becomes a more acceptable price range. And I think that there is a price range as well as a device size and type that exists between the iPod Touch and that iPad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one way you can get there. And you can say, look, the 7-inch iPad is, you could even call it an iPod Touch Plus or whatever, right? Because that device will be, by and large, a consumption device. You'll carry it around to watch movies and to do things like that. That's why it would exist. It's a big iPod.
I think in order for this is the tricky thing, because this device has stood out in that whole tablet race. It really is dominant, and it's taken over the market, and
Yep.
we've seen multiple attempts at failure. And I don't want to go into the products. I mean, we can list the products, but they have all failed one by one.
Yeah,
And the only thing that has been somewhat competitive, and it's not even a direct competitor of the iPad, and that's the Kindle Fire. And the
Right.
only reason why it is considered at all a competitor is because of the pricing. Because the thing is $299.
Well, I would add the other.
$199. I apologize.
The price is what gets it in the door. The Kindle Fire could have a lot less and still cost $199 and be desirable. From a content standpoint, the Kindle can stand up against the iPad 1-to-1. It has all the same stuff: apps, content like TV shows and movies. It's got all that stuff.
Cloud storage. Well, cloud storage.
Yeah, it's got the cloud storage for music.
Music, apps. So it's right there.
Purely consumption and entertainment. It's an entertainment tablet. The Kindle Fire has some shortcomings along the lines of internal storage, along the lines of stupid things like not having physical volume buttons, which drives me crazy.
That actually, I didn't think it would bother me as much, but that is one of the things that drives me up the wall because
well, here's why. So in other words, if there was a consistent UI that was implemented as some kind of an overlay over every single app you could run, that you could bring up to access those volume buttons on the screen, that would not be a problem. That does not exist. Some places in the UI, some apps do not have those volume controls. So you could be playing music in the background, reading a book or a blog or a magazine, and maybe the app you're in now, you don't have access to those volume controls. It's stupid. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
Apple was criticized, and in some ways correctly, for not, for doing the minimalistic thing with the buttons. But Apple devices have volume buttons. You remember they made that mistake on the first iPod Touch. Didn't have volume buttons. Version 2, they added them back because you need that. The Kindle Fire takes the no button thing to a
whole separate extreme.
Yeah, there's no home button. There's
nothing.
Nothing. It's nothing. So, Amazon is a look. There's no nice way to say it. I mean, there's no doubt that Amazon is the Walmart to Apple's Neiman Marcus. There's no doubt about it. But they do listen to customers, and they're going to get it right, and they're going to do it in the same fashion that they always do things. So, V2. I expect to see versions with different volume, different storage allotments. I expect to see expandable storage. I expect to see hardware volume buttons. So they'll get it right. But even the way it is now, again, it's $200 and it does connect to all that cool content. Kindle Fire is absolutely in there.
If you're tuning in on a number of our streaming providers on Stickam, Ustream, Justin TV, even on Stitcher, you could come and join our chat room. If you go to gfqlive.tv, we got a great chat room in there, about 33 people in the chat, chatting it up, talking about it, commenting on what we're saying. If you have any suggestions for best of for the year, this is the place to do it, at gfqlive.tv. So I guess it was a lot of stuff with the tablets. We saw tablets going crazy. The year before, 2010 was all about 3D TVs. And it seems like this year became all about tablets.
Right.
And the netbooks are gone. I mean, 2009 was the year of the netbook. Everybody had a netbook. Netbooks were going crazy. And then people realized how awful they are and that they don't work really well. But how about phones? In my opinion, and now this is debatable.
Right.
Because for the phone thing, in my opinion, Windows Phone, hands down, the biggest year for them. As far as a mobile platform, the biggest year was for Microsoft and was for Windows Phone, because they showed dominance. Mango's a phenomenal release of the operating system, and they're showing that they could potentially be which they will be, but potentially be a major threat to the iOS. And they could possibly do something that Android cannot, because they have a lot of control over the operating system. I thought it was a big year for them.
For Windows Phone, it's been all potential. I mean, and that's a problem. I think for Windows Phone, the one thing I would say is that from a usability perspective, from a look and feel kind of perspective, from a productivity and efficiency perspective, I think that Windows Phone is, in fact, the best OS there is. There's been a lot of talk about the lack of apps and so forth, even though there were 40,000 of them.
Well, what's funny is that when they came out, 2010 they came out, right? It was like late 2010.
Yeah.
when they came out, it was nothing but negative comments and how awful it is, and it doesn't work, and the hardware's bad, and the software's bad. Right. And then, out of nowhere, every journalist that bashed this thing turned around and was like, no, this is great.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed watching that happen. All these people who trashed it year one, pretending that, well, they fixed all the problems, so now it's okay.
Which they only added Twitter. I mean, they did some stuff, but the major thing was Twitter integration in the operating system.
Because that's what was missing from Windows Phone was Twitter integration.
Yeah, because, that's make or break for an operating system, Paul.
Windows Phone V1 had Facebook integration, and they have improved Facebook integration in V2, and that's something that iOS still doesn't have.
But they did improve hardware. I mean, there's some great devices out there now.
Yeah, one of the big lacking areas with the first version of Windows Phone was that those devices were decent, but they weren't leading edge. And I think finally in this version, you're seeing, it's not so much a different range of devices, but, big screen devices with high quality cameras. It's just it's kind of a subtle thing, but it really does kind of put it over the top. I felt like with the first version of Windows Phone, the camera in particular in there was lousy, and it made it, less.
But again, that's hardware. That goes straight to hardware.
There was no reason there couldn't have been a device with a great phone, with a great camera. There just wasn't.
Which one was the first one? I know they launched with like 3 or 4 of them, but what was the first one that came out?
Well, I mean, there were number ones that were first. The Focus was the big one.
The Focus was the big one.
The Focus was the one I used all year long. Definitely the best of the first generation. But again, you have those caveats. The Focus had 2 weird deals with it. One was the camera was terrible. And the second one was it was one of the few cameras that few phones, Windows phones, that offered expandable storage, which Microsoft did not explicitly support. So a lot of people would buy these storage cards. You'd have to do a hard reset of the phone. And it may work, it may not work. You never had any way of knowing. I got lucky. The very first one I tried worked, so I left it alone, and it always worked fine. But if you look now at version 2, the Focus S and the Focus Flash, neither one of those has expandable storage. And I think what they learned a lesson. You just can't do that. If it's not supported by the OS, it's not worth it.
But 7.5, I mean, they had a phenomenal year, and they kind of paved their way to 2012 and where this is going. I mean, we've seen the deal with Nokia, and these phones are going to be coming next year, and they're going to be phenomenal phones. What we expect is going to be great. I know we're getting the 710, and then whatever the next one is. I don't know if we're getting the 810 or we're going to get something else.
Yeah, the 810 essentially, whatever they call it. Yeah.
But we're seeing what Microsoft is planning on doing. But as far as Android goes, the only positive Android operating system release is now, and that's Ice Cream Sandwich. That's in my opinion, I've used them all. And I think until now, they still lack.
Does Ice Cream Sandwich make your list for this year?
See, that's why I put it in this
because it's not really
limbo
there yet.
You know why I put it in?
Android. If you look back on this year, obviously they sold very well, but
they didn't really pave the way with anything with software-wise.
They came out with a tablet OS that they refused to share with anybody for a long time,
and it failed. That release failed.
Went nowhere. And then I don't know. I mean, I have to say, just from the perspective of someone who cares about technology. I have not been that excited about anything Android related this year.
I'm going based on just the year, and who knows, because they might turn around and be like, well, the next release is coming out in March, so then we'll never talk about it.
Well,
for the best of.
Actually, I would say Ice Cream Sandwich running on that Nexus, the new Nexus phone, whatever that's called, Nexus Prime, could be it. It could be the most recent God phone or whatever. But is it even out? I mean, is it really out? I mean, is it, does it make the list? I mean, I don't know.
As of right now, that phone is coming out 2015.
Yeah, so we're 2 weeks away from the end of the year.
Yeah, it's coming out actually Friday.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this thing makes, for me, I don't know if I could put it on the list.
Okay.
Because I look back on everything else that happened, and I see a lot of disarray there.
Yeah, I mean, if this came out
June,
it would have been a big
thing.
story, and I really would have said, well, Android is showing dominance and growth and maturity with their operating system. But as of right now, if you look at major players in the game for operating systems for 2011, you're looking at Windows Phone and iOS, and the Windows Phone made a lot of headway compared to what iOS did. iOS actually, people complain about the latest version.
Let's be clear what we mean by that. I mean, obviously, Apple sold tens of millions of iOS.
I'm talking about development of the operating system, the maturity of the operating system.
So, yeah, I mean, right. So I see disarray from the Android side. I see evolution, and on both iOS and
Because
Windows.
iOS, I mean, it's and I hate to use it, but it's nearly perfected. I don't think there's more they could do with this. And
Well,
I'm talking about the look. I'm talking about the
without
UI.
changing it.
Yeah, without changing
in other words,
it.
I actually believe. Yes, I agree with that 100%. In fact, I'm amazed they've taken it this far in its current form. I really think they have to do the Windows Phone integration thing, and I think that when you look at the way they did Twitter integration in iOS 5, you can see kind of a hint of that.
Yeah, still no Facebook integration though. That's the mind blowing thing.
App in and out thing, it really that needs to be upgraded. That's just old school.
You know what's hysterical? The fact that Twitter integration was make or break for Windows Phone, but the fact that there's still no Facebook integration in the operating system in iOS, it baffles me. And you have to use a separate app. I mean, you cannot. You have to use a third party app for people who don't use
this in Windows. I'm sorry, in iOS, where you take a picture with the phone. And what you want to do is
share,
send it to Facebook from there. You can't do it.
No.
What year is this? What are you kidding me?
Actually, my wife.
That's crazy to me.
My wife loves the phone because my wife has the iPhone, and she says one thing that you could do with Android was hit the share button and send to Facebook. You cannot do it with this. You have to actually. She's using Instagram because that sends it directly to Facebook
because it has those links.
Yeah. But it doesn't upload it to Facebook, It just attaches itself. But it's a small little thing, but
it's gonna come. I mean, you know they're gonna get there, but it's just again, Windows Phone had this last year. So for the past year, I have very easily been sharing photos on Facebook without really thinking about it. And it's one of those things like you feel like you're stepping back in time when you pick up iOS, an iPhone, and you're thinking it's got to be here. I'm just missing it, but it's not there.
So since we're on the iPhone topic, would you? And I have it on my list. I don't know if you have it on yours. I don't see it on yours. Would you consider Siri a hit for the year?
It's a hit from a marketing standpoint. I think Apple needed some way to differentiate the iPhone 4S, and in typical Apple fashion, they did it in sort of an artificial way, which is they put this thing on iPhone 4S only, even though it would work fine.
Paul, I got an email from a guy, and he wanted to come on the show.
Yep.
And I almost said, you know what, we should do this because it would be a great bit, but I thought we would get a little too mean. The guy has a book and a tutorial on how to use Siri and how to properly speak to Siri for the best outcome. And the guy's selling the book for $30. And he wanted to come on the show to talk about the book. And I was like, I know Paul. And Paul would have a ball with this guy. I'm like, but I just can't do it.
Listen, because the way technology is supposed to work is I contort the way I do things so I can use a service, not it works the way I work. That makes lots of sense.
But the guy wanted to come on. He's like, I charge $29.99 for the book, and it's in PDF form. It's not even a real book.
This would have been really difficult.
He would have punched the guy over the computer.
So no, Siri. Listen, I give them credit. There's kind of like a good bad thing going on here, right? On the good side, Apple does do a great job of pulling together things that have been there for a long time. There are components of this thing from the company Siri. There are components from Dragon Naturally Speaking. There are UI components that were over here. Tore them all, they put them all together, and they come out with something that, frankly, is not quite the same that was available elsewhere. I mean, Android. There are Android apps for voice control. There's voice control built into Windows Phone. Windows itself, and I think the Mac have had voice control elements for some time, but they do it in this way that kind of integrates with all those apps that they have on the phone. And you know what? They did a great job. On the other hand, that is what they did, and people tend to overstate. It appears as if magical, to people, and it's like, guys, it's not that different from. And plus, I think there are negative aspects to Siri where, as we've talked about in the past, where you're going to have people talking out loud to their phones, and then worse yet, it's bad enough when you hear someone, they have a Bluetooth headset and they're talking to someone, and you hear half the conversation. Siri talks back to them, and then you get to hear that too, And I imagine being on this subway train with 10 people all talking.
Oh, everybody's talking to this thing.
And this is a recipe for disaster. So
I actually I think it's great, but I think it's great for my own laziness. I have a really difficult time creating reminders for myself, and I have to do these reminders because I'll have 2 or 3 meetings and I'll overlap them all.
Sure.
And the only reason why I don't do it is for whatever reason, it's just too much to go and type it in my Google Calendar. With Siri, and I was using it for a couple of days, I very easily said, set a reminder, meeting with Paul, 1 p.m. on Monday.
Right.
And boom, it's done. I could see it being important for that. But as far as saying, Siri, how many, pounds are in a ton, I don't see that really.
It's an abuse of technology.
Yeah, it's a gimmick.
It is a gimmick.
But
so
it'll
also,
eventually.
I hesitate just to trash it because I trashed the first iPad and then here I am a year later, it's a big deal. So
I said the iPhone will never work. I said nobody's going to buy an Apple phone. Everybody wants a Palm or a BlackBerry.
I have to say for the iPhone, that one I got right away. In fact, I was convinced that was going to change everything. And even though I write a lot about Microsoft, I had to cover that thing very heavily, and I did. And of course, I was very critical the first year of the things that were missing. But then again, you look back at what they did over time, and you realize they did a really good job of getting that thing up to date. The iPad was a different story because by that point, it's like, Jesus, I mean, how many devices are they going to make that do exactly the same thing?
Sure.
But if you look at it in the perspective of time, where I really do think that they're going to take iOS to a point where they don't need Mac OS 10 anymore, you can kind of see this migration or transition occurring, and it's very interesting. So
what I remember from the iPad thing was the name and the debacle over what it's going to be called, and everybody said, well, it's going to be called the Slate, the iSlate. And HP came out with the Slate way before they did, I guess, to kind of beat them.
Right.
And they called it the iPad, which is an awful name.
But it's like anything else, you're used to it.
You're used to it now. You can't see it being
made fun of
anything
Pentium,
Yeah.
Pentium was such a stupid name. And the reason they came up with it is because they couldn't trademark numbers. They had 486, 386, and anyone could use that term. So they needed a word that was made up. So, and suggested the number 5, right? Because it was the 586.
Yeah.
And that's why they did Pentium. But I remember when they announced that name, we all made fun of that. But you don't think anything of Pentium anymore. It's just,
It is what it is. That's the name we all know. You have. I'm gonna go to your list right now, Paul, and you are right. I could potentially, we said, was it the year of the iPad? Was it the year of the Windows Phone? But it could potentially be the year of cloud services.
Yeah, well, not coincidentally, right? So I think a lot of the big gains that are occurring right now in the industry are mobile computing and cloud computing. And when you can use those things together, it's like that peanut butter cup commercial. It's like two great tastes that go together. So,
but we're a society that bashed, cloud storage for a while. We didn't want it on the cloud. We were scared to put anything on the cloud. And it seems like somewhere in the second quarter of last year, everything turned around.
I don't know what changes occur that make these things okay. But when you first hear about cloud computing, what it sounds like, and frankly, what it was a new name for something that already existed. Dropbox had been around for a while before the name cloud computing ever came around. I think. I mean, the notion of I think they used to call it it was like a USB flash drive in the sky, or some kind of. They had some kind of a marketing term like that.
Well, didn't Microsoft have their version for a while? What was it called? Their cloud service.
Well, they have SkyDrive still.
Wasn't it iMesh before SkyDrive, or iMesh was after SkyDrive?
It's a good question.
I'm going to look it up.
I don't remember. Yeah, it was Live Mesh originally.
Yeah.
They also had a competing service called Windows Live Sync.
Yeah, iMesh was something else. iMesh was a pirating peer-to-peer service.
Not a Microsoft product.
No, it was called Live Mesh.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft does things that in a way that makes sense for the products they sell. Apple does things, that make sense for that. And then, then there are these third parties. Google creates things that are purely cloud services for the most part, unless they are writing an application for a mobile device or PC that, really serves
Hotmail was the first, cloud-based email service that really took off to the level that it did.
Except that we didn't call it that. It was a web-based, and in fact, the name Hotmail is HTML with extra letters in it. That was the point. It was like a webmail service, So that's what I mean by, cloud computing in some ways is a new name for something that already existed. I think of cloud storage as offsite backup, which is certainly one way to look at that kind of storage. Yeah, I think that this year the maturation of cloud computing and cloud services literally is just that enough time's gone by that we're starting to see some interesting solutions appear that work well and work seamlessly and work with the device types that we use, and that typically means Windows PCs, and it means iPhones and Android devices and things like that. So there's certainly many choices.
And it seems like you're not just sticking with one service. I know a lot of people, and I thought it was only me. I have the Google music storage, and I put all the stuff on the cloud there, and I have the Amazon cloud storage. And I have Spotify for my music. So I'm in all these different environments for pretty much essentially the same thing. And I know a lot of people that are doing the same exact thing. They're in all these different environments for the same exact thing. And I guess there's no one go-to company at this point for this.
If you have an iPhone, you have this great range of choices for these services that you can connect to. Spotify and then all that stuff. On the other hand, maybe you're like a PC guy and you have these services that you connect to, and you want to go buy a mobile device of some kind, a smartphone or whatever. You may approach that from the perspective of, I'm using these services already. What devices do they work with? So you can go either way with it. But I think that the pervasiveness of these services and the great UIs, one of the things I've been looking at recently is Evernote, for the upteenth time. Evernote is a great cloud service that has awesome clients on Windows, Mac, the web, Windows Phone, Android, iOS, and separately, by the way, on iPhone and iPad. You're kind of covered there, no matter which one of those things you use. And I think that how you pick these services will depend on, where you're coming from, what you're using now. You are an iPod guy with iTunes, iCloud makes a lot of sense with iTunes Match. If you're an Android user or someone who has done a lot of stuff through Amazon, the Amazon Cloud Drive and that Cloud Player stuff makes a lot of sense. The Amazon MP3 player that you get.
Which ones do you use right now? You have Amazon, right? You got
well, I use a combination. So, to me, the big ones this year, the biggest one of all, if I had to pick one, would be iCloud and iTunes Match. iCloud is free, and they have upgrades for storage. And then iTunes Match is $25 a year. I think that both of those are an incredible bargain. I use iTunes on the PC sort of begrudgingly because I've had to, although that's going away too, right? For a device sync between iPads, iPod Touches, and iPhones.
Yeah.
But because I've been using it and because I've been managing my music in this solution, getting that stuff up into iCloud and through iTunes Match is a fairly seamless process. And it works really well. And, we talked about that and I've written about it. And to me, that's just fantastic. Now, some people don't like Apple. Some people don't like iTunes, whatever. Some people don't use iOS devices. So for those people right now, and this precludes Windows Phone users, unfortunately, but I think that on the Android side of the fence, I think the Amazon Cloud Drive and Cloud Player are the better solution than Google stuff. Although it's kind of a close call, I suppose. And so that's where my stuff is.
I'm trying to think. I guess it's fairly pretty much the same exact thing. I haven't really looked at the music catalog that Google has right now. I haven't really.
Well, I'm thinking of it more from a perspective of getting in other words, you're taking your
content
own
on there.
Content and you're putting it into their service.
But you kind of would want to be where you would buy more music, right? You want to be using the same environment.
It doesn't actually matter, right? So I buy music from iTunes a lot because they have high quality AAC songs. I buy music from Zoom Marketplace. I happen to subscribe to the Zoom Pass, which is like a completely different world and has other considerations around it, but okay. And I buy music from Amazon sometimes. I could buy music from Google. In fact, I have downloaded some music from Google because they had some free or cheap offerings around the time when they launched that store. All of that stuff plays on everything else and can be pushed into all those various services. It's all completely interoperable. It's a wonderful world right now, and it's something that doesn't exist for TV shows and music and stuff. TV shows and movies, rather. Maybe someday it will, but right now it doesn't.
You had another thing on your list that I didn't think of when I was creating it, and you picked the death of the standalone camera. And I have to agree with you. 2011 was the death of the, the point and shoot in many ways.
I saw an ad literally this week that made me pause. And it was an ad for a point and click camera where you could take off the
Nikon.
The lens, and you can replace it with a, sort of like you would with an SLR.
The Nikon N1. Yeah, it's their big
and
thing.
It made me think for a second, like, oh, damn, have I done this a little too early? They have clip-on lenses like that for the iPhone, right? I guess all I would say is for most people, and I mean literally for people who are going to take pictures at birthday parties and picnics and stuff like that. I don't mean you're a professional photographer in the sunset.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean normal people. So these new cameras, it's not all of them, but a lot of them. And I don't know any Android phones that fall into this category, although I know there must be some. The iPhone 4S does, the HTC Titan does, which is a Windows phone, and also the Samsung S, Focus S, also a Windows phone. 8 megapixel cameras, high quality lenses, like actual decent cameras. They're good.
I think the Nexus Prime has a really good camera, and it has to do. They have something for the shutter, like it's a instant shutter, whatever, where it instantly takes a picture. There's no stall.
So it's very, very quick. Yeah,
because
before I think there was a seconds long wait, as you launch the app. Yeah, so it's a big deal. This is a really big deal.
No, I absolutely think it's a huge deal, and for me, I have an SLR. I love taking pictures. And I got more into it the last couple months. The funny story is when I was laid off, before I started this, I was actually looking to get into photography, and I wanted to take a couple courses and a couple lessons, and I wanted to start doing that. And Jessica, my wife, bought me a Nikon D60,
right.
And a week later, I started the network and didn't use it for months.
Right.
So, but I've been getting myself into it more because I have some more time now, and I absolutely love it. This will never replace that, but you're absolutely right. When it comes to
that
birthday parties, instant, you're not going to really carry these point and shoots in your pocket. The other thing that I noticed, I watched the comparison. A camera
bag, by the way.
What was that?
If you were going to carry a camera bag, but a DSLR or God help you, an SLR, and the lenses and all that, and that you're still going to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely, and you're going to have your tripod. This is not going to replace that.
This doesn't replace it.
But I saw a very interesting thing.
How fun is it to be able to have that one thing?
It's a lot. It's unbelievable, and the reason why is it's not just the photos; it's the video as well. I watched the video comparing the Canon Mark II, whatever, the high end Canon, the $3,000 digital SLR, and the iPhone 4S, and they were shooting video, HD video. I have to tell you, yes, there is a difference, and we're showing. I think it was like Los Angeles. They were showing like Sunset Boulevard. It's not make or break for most people. I mean, if you're going, and if I show this to the average person, they would not know that there's a difference in the quality.
Right.
And that has to be scary to the mainstream, especially, like someone like Canon that has high-def video cameras, and Canon has, the point-and-shoots with the HD video. You can get a very close picture with your phone. And that separation is no longer there. It's one unified device. And again, I'm going to get those emails saying, well, no, how are you comparing the Canon, $3,000 camera
well, of course
to an iPhone?
But those people have.
But you have to understand, your mom, my wife does not care about how good it is. As it's in HD and it looks great. You put it on the TV.
Half of the stuff I talk about falls into this category. When I talk about stuff like the iPad, you could pick it apart all you want. But what it boils down to is for that 90% of normal people, this is all they need.
This is all they need,
and that's why it's important.
It's a great picture. I mean, the picture is excellent, and if you could play with it a little bit in Photoshop, you could do whatever. You'll have a phenomenal picture. And if you told someone it was with a point and shoot, they wouldn't know because it's the same quality. And that's the trend that we saw this year. And you're absolutely right. This is, I don't know. Do you think it's going to kill? I know it won't kill the higher end cameras, but do you think a lot of these lower end $100 point and shoots, they're done?
I think there's going to be a lot of fallout there. Remember, for a couple of years there was a market for little portable video recorders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flash storage. What were they called?
Oh, like the flip cams?
Yes.
I have it. I still
Yeah, no,
use mine.
everyone has one, but then you don't bring them anywhere. I mean, I've
No.
gone on trips where I handed one of these to my kids and I said, look, you can have this for the trip, take videos, do whatever you want. And one day they did, and then that was the end of that. Like, nobody cares. That came and went. I think, point and click type cameras will still be around. They just won't be the big deal, and that they've had some kind of a bell curve growth pattern, and then they're done. I mean, I think there will still be some, but by and large, people are going to do this through their phones.
I think the real killer is going to be when, and again, I'm going to get those emails, so send them over, guysfromqueens@gmail.com.
Yep.
When they put the same camera in the iPod Touch, I think that's really going to damage the market.
Yeah.
Because not everybody wants an iPhone, but if this thing gives you phenomenal video, picture and video, you're going to buy this for $199 rather than spending it on a point and shoot, when you could get better or the same with this one. And you get a lot more.
Because that thing in your hand is also a mini computer.
It's a mini computer.
You can edit the photos on there. You can, if you're connected to Wi-Fi, upload them to where you want them to go.
Yeah.
Facebook typically, or whatever. That's stuff that they could build that stuff into a point and click, but at that point,
in my opinion, I think it's a very underrated device, the iPod Touch. You don't hear about it.
You're right.
As much.
Actually, the iPod Touch is great, but the camera's lousy.
The camera's awful.
They
Yeah.
need to fix that. Yeah. I was amazed they did not release a version of the iPod Touch that was based on the 4S. It must be expensive componentry or something.
I think there's a reason.
Yeah, and it may be before next fall they will in fact release a new iPod Touch.
Well, the body has not changed, and here's the thing: the iPod Touch is really thin if you compare it to
super thin. It makes the iPhone.
I have it here. Let me see here.
Look like a brick by comparison. Do you have an iPhone there? Because it's amazing to compare them side by side.
I could get it. You want me to grab it?
Actually, I could just do it here. I got them here.
I don't have mine, but it is.
Oops.
You have yours. There you go. Let me see.
Both of them have a little bit of a case on them, but I mean, they don't really.
So this one doesn't.
So the top, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's half the size if you look at it. And this actually, if you look at the iPod Touch, it kind of fits their.
I mean, look, it's not quite. It's like half.
No, it is. It is half. Yeah. But it fits the whole
it's also,
Mac thing, right? The whole curved edge. It kind of fits that look. So I didn't think they thought it was necessary.
Right. It's true to form. In fact, the iPad is like this, right?
Yeah.
It literally has that same. Feel.
It's the same look. So I didn't think they needed to change it, and I don't know why they didn't give it better hardware. Even keep the same processor, but put the camera in there.
Right.
I guess they'll do it the next.
By the way, that may be a thickness issue. Right.
That could be. Yeah.
That could be part of it.
But again, portable cameras, standalone point and shoots. I think this did massive damage with these phones having these unbelievable cameras in there, and they're only going to get better.
Yep.
So that's going to change over time. Do you want to pick one, Paul? You pick one.
Pick one. What are the topics?
Pick a topic. Pick one that you feel for the year. I've been picking them all.
So, we talked about the iPad too, but as far as mobile devices and portable computing and everything goes, there is always going to be this part of the population that needs to create content, that need to type. And obviously we're part of that group. And there's been a very exciting development this year in highly portable computers. Apple released the first version of their MacBook Air last year, but that computer had some caveats attached to it.
It was slow.
Had previous generation processors, didn't have the backlit keyboard and so forth. So this year they released the second gen MacBook Air that had all that stuff, the Core i5 and 7, backlit keyboard, and all of a sudden, very close to perfect. I don't feel that the typing experience on those computers is fantastic. And for me personally, I prefer Windows and I prefer Windows computers. So early this year, not last year, this year, bought a ThinkPad Edge 420S, which is a fairly thin computer, fairly light and everything. Integrated battery, just like an Apple product and everything. Since then, they've come up with something called the ThinkPad X1, which is even a more desirable computer that does not have a optical drive and has an optional slice battery, which is something I would love Apple to do.
How many versions of the S1 are there?
Of the which one? X1.
X1.
Yeah. I think there's only one version. I mean, you can get it with. I think they even sell a version that doesn't have a SSD. I think you can get it with a traditional hard drive
Oh,
if you
okay.
want, but it's a fairly
No, because I
thin
googled it
device.
and it came up with a standard hard drive. It didn't come with the
Yeah, but there's an SSD
Yeah,
version.
yeah. If you go to their website, you can
Yep.
see it.
Yep. So these things, we're calling them Ultrabooks, and I think that in the future they're going to get even better. And it's probably fairer to say that 2012 is the year of the Ultrabook because we're going to get those Ivy Bridge versions and so forth.
But we're
what
getting the
gonna
introduction. Yeah.
yeah, and we're going to see a kind of a combination of the best of the iPad and the best of the notebooks of the past, where the guts of the computer will be behind the screen. You'll be able to detach it and use it like a tablet, and then you'll have like the actual laptop typing experience if you want to use them together, as well as probably better battery life because you probably have a battery in both
Well,
sides.
I think they're going to eventually drop the term, in the next 12 to 18 months. There's going to be no more Ultrabooks and no more MacBook Airs. I think the MacBook is just, the Air is going to be the MacBook, and I think all laptops, higher-end laptops, of course, are going to have this form factor where it's ultra-thin.
Yes, exactly right.
Because
In
they're
fact,
capable of doing it.
a 15-inch version of the MacBook Air would be very exciting to me. And likewise, if there are PC makers today who are kind of stretching. I think it was Samsung who just announced or released a 14-inch laptop that they're calling an Ultrabook, but it comes with an optical drive, and it's really kind of stretching the boundaries of what we think of as an Ultrabook. But thin, light, great battery life, high-res screen, all that stuff. This is fantastic, and it's not surprising perhaps that Apple is once again kind of setting the stage, but it's also true that once PC makers get their tendrils into this, we're going to see a much wider range of devices and device types in a much wider range of prices. And I happen to prefer Windows, but for me, that's just 2 wins in a row because they're going to be cheaper and they're going to run the OS, natively that I want to run.
I read a very interesting article, and they were talking about how the Apple needs to get rid of the Air brand because
just make that the
because the Air brand apparently, according to I got to find out who wrote it. The Air brand is actually tainted with the fact that many people have this perception that it's slow, it's older hardware. And
I don't know. I think these new ones have completely erased
the new ones
that,
are phenomenal because they're running i7s. You could get an i7 in that thing.
Yeah, I bet most people don't really understand that was ever a problem, and that they'll probably sell more of these than the other ones. I mean,
is there anything you would buy right now with those portable, the Ultrabooks?
No, the ones that are out now. No, there's an Asus out that looks okay. There's an IdeaPad looks okay.
Samsung, I think, has
Samsung
one.
looks okay, but they all have some issue. I mean, honestly. No, I would buy an X1. If I was going to buy a computer right now, I'd buy an X1. Except that I wouldn't buy an X1 right now because I know that Lenovo always announces new computers in January at CES, and I would wait the 1 month to see what they're going to do. Now, the problem with that is they tend to release these things in February and then March, and so there's a little bit of a wait. And that's why last year what I did was based on what they announced at CES last year, I bought the Edge 420S, and then they later came out with the X1. But we'll know more soon. I mean, I would wait because CES is going to be an interesting time for many reasons, but one of them is going to be to see what Ultrabooks are coming. I don't like any of the existing Ultrabooks enough to give up what I have or to recommend them unless you like had to have it now for some reason.
Well, CES is going to be interesting this year because last year we saw these Ultrabook concepts come out. And we saw, still the year before was 3D TVs. This year was a lot of the Ultrabooks. I'm wondering what is this year's CES? What's going to be the showstopper? What's going to be the top item? And I think it's still going to be these Ultrabooks. I think now it's a reality with the new Intel chipsets.
Yeah, I'm like in the computer market.
In the computer market, yeah.
It could be Windows 8 slates too. I mean, I don't know what Microsoft is going to announce around that. So
yeah,
we'll have to wait and see. I really do think that some combination device that's a slate plus a keyboard and is thus an Ultrabook in that form factor would be so awesome.
That Lenovo from a couple years ago. What was it? The UI or the U1? That thing was phenomenal.
Except, like everything else, there was always that one weirdness to it, right? And the one weirdness to that device was when you took the screen off, you weren't running Windows, you weren't running
Linux,
Android,
right?
you weren't running Linux, you were running some kind of weird custom Lenovo thing. I think that was based on Linux, but it was, they were going to open it up to development and everything. It was like, oh, guys, no, what is this?
Just have it run Windows, yeah.
Well, if they were going to do that today, it would run Android, right?
You
if
think
they were
so?
going to do it tomorrow, it would run Windows 8. That would be it. That
Yeah.
would be
Well, now you can with a ARM chipset. You put an ARM chipset in the display, and you got it running.
yeah, so they were a little ahead of the game, I think.
Yeah.
With that device. I mean, it was so
Couple years,
awesome
couple
for
years
the
too early.
time, but yeah.
You also on your list, you have apps for best in 2011. It was the year of the app, if you look at it, and a lot of people that normally are not app people started embracing the app environment, and we're seeing it, the whole app concept go into the desktop OS. We're going to see it next year with Windows 8. And we saw this year with the Mac App Store, which one may say was not successful, but it is still conditioning the computer user, the average user, to think apps when it comes to programs.
No, it's just a smart idea.
Listen, nobody's going to the store to buy a CD, of whatever.
Right.
You're downloading it. I mean, that's just how it's become. You're not getting a big box, of.
Yeah.
It was crazy the way we did it. You would get a box this big for a CD this big.
We will never be able to explain to the children why we did what we did. There's no sense to it anymore, but it's what we did.
And I always kept the boxes, and I kept all the pamphlets in the box.
It's going away, but you can still have a guy in a car drive around in the morning and drop off a newspaper at your house. That's crazy. What's crazier is it used to be a child doing it.
On a bicycle.
They used to have a kid on a bike and they were in every neighborhood flinging newspaper at your house. That was the way we delivered information around the neighborhood. I mean, how crazy is that? But that's the way it was.
And we're seeing, potentially in 2012, Office is going to come to iOS, and that's going to be an app form.
Yeah. So about a year ago, a source of mine from Microsoft told me to expect what he called a flood of iOS apps in 2011 from Microsoft. And I figured, because of the timing, we were going to hear about it probably at CES last year, and we never did. And I mentioned it from time to time, and it never kind of happened. And
we saw it last week.
All of a sudden, this past week has been crazy. I got to look at my articles.
I was actually really surprised with the Xbox Live app on the iPad. And it's done very well. I mean, visually, it's still missing a couple key things, which they'll definitely implement in the long run. But
in just the past week, they've released Connectimals, which is a game for kids, on the iPhone and iPad. It's a universal app or whatever they call it. SkyDrive, OneNote in a version for the iPad. There was a version for iPhone previously. Halo Waypoint and My Xbox Live, the app you're talking about. And then they had all the the apps they released over the year previous, like Bing and PhotoSynth and the original version of OneNote. And
now,
this is an amazing change.
Now, what's interesting to me is that Apple is not that they're going to reject it, but they're not giving them a hard time with this. But when it comes to Google, Apple's really giving them a hard time with their applications.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that the other day.
It's funny you say that. So one might ask, why would Microsoft release all of these apps on iOS now and not release them on Android now, since Android is actually selling even better than iOS? And you could make the argument that the Android market, if you will, for devices is closer in, sort of thematically to Windows than iOS is. And, a lot of, I'm sure the same percentage of people that use Windows plus Android is true as would be Windows plus iOS. Like why would you ignore Android? I think that Microsoft and Apple both are kind of shunning Android.
I think they're shunning them. I think they're shunning them because they do have tremendous market share, but in a way, the way I perceive it is that, well, you're not ready for this. You're not mature enough. Your operating system is still not stable enough for us.
And we're not too happy with you. Like we feel like you've stolen.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it. I really do. I think it's a psychological thing. But whatever. I mean, so a lot of people, hopefully Office happens. Office on iOS would be one of the biggest tech stories of the year next year. It would be such a dramatic strategy change for Microsoft and something.
Would you, as someone that writes, as someone that's always updating your website and you this is your job, you write.
Mm-hmm.
Would you use Word on the iPad? And I'm not talking about getting a keyboard. I'm talking about using the glass.
No, I would not, unless something else changed.
Okay.
No, that's just me. So when you say I'm a writer, I am a writer, but I'm a very specific kind of writer. And I don't just mean I write about Windows, although that would have to factor into this decision.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a need to do things like take screenshots, process them somehow, and post them up to a blog using whatever method I use. One of the problems with the iPad, with iOS, is that multitasking is kind of a bulky thing. We talked about the inability to do task switching with a keyboard, that kind of stuff. When I talked about Harry McCracken earlier, his idiocy over this iPad thing is like, that biting your nose to spite your face. It's like, but the iPad gets 8 hours of battery life. Carry an extra battery, you jackass. You have a productivity workhorse you could be using, and you're like contorting yourself to use this stupid little screen with a stupid extra keyboard. It's just dumb. So no, for me, I wouldn't. But I could picture people doing it who have
many people. Oh my God, can you?
Not professional writers, but I mean, but other people, students. How great would it be to have a OneNote or a Word iOS app and be able to carry that thing around the class?
I would love it.
Fine.
I would love it linked to the cloud, so you pick. If you're on the go, you type everything up. And you're on your iPad.
The only way I use OneNote. OneNote.
And then you go home.
OneNote is not a local app. It's something that connects to notes that are up in the cloud. That's how I use it.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's going to be beneficial. I don't think anybody's going to be writing their thesis on an iPad.
No, the truth is someone will.
Who knows?
Like someone will create a painting on the iPad, and it will be beautiful. Someone will, take a beautiful photograph with that device's crappy camera. Someone will.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my doctoral dissertation on there. People are doing it.
Some people.
You know what's funny, Paul?
they
10 years from now, 15 years from now, there's going to be a whole generation of kids that never have used a keyboard, and all they have used is a piece of glass.
Yeah.
And they're going to look at us like...
Wells had a term for those people. They live below the earth. But, I look, you could use a laptop computer to play video games. What a superfluous use for such a wonderful machine. You could do nothing but play Farmville in Facebook on a PC if you wanted to. Some people do that. That's not what that device is for, right?
Talking about video games, Paul. Modern Warfare 3 ruled the video game world this year.
Yeah, no big surprise there. I mean, I spent the previous year playing Black Ops and occasionally being annoyed enough to go play some other game for a little while. Modern Warfare 3 will be the game I play for the next year. It is amazing to me, how successful this stuff is. One of the factoids that came out this week, not a factoid, is actually a fact. A factoid, by the way, is something that's not true, but but an actual fact, was that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 made $1 billion faster than any other entertainment item in history, meaning it did so in 16 days. The movie Avatar took 17 days to make $1 billion. And Call of Duty Black Ops.
November 11th, I'm looking at a story. $6.5 million in units, 6.5 million units sold.
Yep.
And that was in November. They earned $1 billion in revenue in 16 days.
Yeah, so they've had over 30 million sales now. They have an online service that has over 6 million users, 1 million of which have paid for this thing. They've gotten to 1 million premium online service users faster than any online service in history.
I mean, they set the record. I mean, Black Ops had the record a year ago, but Modern Warfare 3 brought in almost $500 million in 24 hours.
Yep.
I mean, that's...
There is no movie that compares to that.
No.
The biggest movie of all time for that kind of thing in one day sales was that Black Knight, the second one, the Black Knight Returns or whatever it was called.
The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight Returns. I don't remember the figure, but it was somewhere in the $240 million in 24 hours, that kind of thing. Not even close.
Yeah. The Black Knight was an indie project.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a spoof of the Dark Knight.
Was it this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Avatar. So they're comparing it to Avatar, for example. And
Yes.
Avatar earned $1 billion in 17 days
Yep.
after opening up in the theaters. I mean, that's phenomenal numbers, but that's a movie that cost, I mean,
Well,
a lot.
Call of Duty's big business too.
I mean, that costs a lot too. But
this wasn't
you could
three
pump,
guys in a garage.
but you could pump these out every year.
Well, they literally do.
And they do, and they'll be able to, and I guarantee the next version will make even more.
Curious to see what they do. I wrote about that in a blog post today. You know, the Call of Duty game started off as World War II shooters. The first 3 games were World War II. The 4th game was Modern Warfare. The 5th game, they went back to World War II, then Modern Warfare 2. And, you know, I don't know where you go from here because they've wrapped up the Modern Warfare storyline.
Space.
Then it doesn't get stupid. Then you jump the shark, right?
Yeah.
That's like James Bond went to space in
Yeah.
whatever that movie was, Moonraker.
Yeah.
And it was silly and stupid. So I don't know. I'm not saying they should go back to World War II, but I don't know what they should do. I don't know what you do next. Do you make a Vietnam game? Do you make I don't know. So I'm very interested. It's a tough thing to follow up when the theme of the previous series was basically like a World War III thermonuclear, disaster involving every major country on Earth. So the next game, by definition, is going to. I don't know where you go from there. So we'll see.
By the way, my first, one of my first video games was Red Baron on my Tandy.
Jeez.
Just putting it out there, talking about war games.
One of the best games I ever played in my life was called Wings, which was a World War I biplane shooter game on the Amiga. It was fantastic.
I had Wing Commander too on my Tandy. That Tandy lasted a while. It was phenomenal. I think it's interesting how we're looking at the video games. Did you hear the story? The Virginia, the latest Virginia Tech shooting. They tried to pin it on Grand Theft Auto 5, and it's not even out.
They always try to pin things on entertainment that people don't approve of.
But it's phenomenal. It's interesting how it's still looked at. It's perceived
the music
like that.
made me do it.
But nobody, you don't hear like, oh, Avatar made me go, chop down trees and destroy civilization. Nobody blames movies, blockbuster hits like that.
Right. I mean, I think of it more like video games. If you are having a bad day at work, playing a video game isn't going to go make you shoot up the office. It's almost like an outlet that will hopefully make you not go shoot up the office. I mean, I think of it as sort of the opposite effect. This is a way to relieve stress. I mean, I suppose if you were really horrible at the game, that could just lead to more stress. But I can't help you.
Real Anthony Camp in our chat room says, pin it on the Kardashians, and I agree with you 100%. Every problem should be pinned on the Kardashians. I'm just going to, you had one. I'm going to go through 2 more. You had Server on your list, and you had Windows Home Server 2011. Now, are people? I know you are, and I have a server here too. But are people still in that mindset to have a server?
No, they're not. But what I'm saying is they should. And I think the neat thing about a server is you would basically use it the way you use a PC today. And I think that people are using PCs incorrectly in this fashion today, which is...
I think people use many things incorrectly, including the toaster.
You need a central point in your house that stores content and backs it up to the cloud. Right? You can do this kind of from PC to PC, but actually... I think the best way to do it is to have it centralized on a machine that is just a bunch of hard
I agree
drives.
with you. 100% I agree with you.
It gives you a kind of data redundancy kind of effect. And that becomes the point at which your data is backed up to the cloud.
Now, why, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, why should you use Windows Home Server 2011 rather than just getting a Windows machine and just putting everything on there and backing it up?
Because a server is a server, and there are certain things built into servers that make them superior to PCs.
I know they've made it a lot easier for the average person to use.
Listen, I get that this isn't for everybody, but the thing is, all of us have photos that we want to make sure are out there, safe. All of us have important documents and data. All of us, well, most of us probably have music collections. Some of us have, video collections, DVD rips or whatever, home movies, whatever it is. I happen to have a lot of this stuff. And what I like is the notion that this stuff is centralized. It's automatically being backed up to the cloud. And then I can access it from the devices and PCs that I actually use interactively.
Yeah.
I like the notion that if I were to go on a business trip and my laptop gets stolen, or if I were to drive up the street and go out to eat for dinner and I come home and my house is burned down to the ground, that I'm not going to lose everything that I own from a
Everything is
data
done. Yeah.
standpoint. And there are a lot of strategies around making that stuff all okay, but I think centralizing how you do stuff and backing it up to the cloud, like this offsite kind of thing.
And it makes it so much easier. I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that it's all pretty much automated and you could set it up in the way that it just does it for you. If I told you what it's like here at the studio, it's nearly embarrassing the way that we are backing stuff up at this point. Because
Sure.
we made the big mistake of, and if I had a server at that point, it would have been a lot easier. But we had one computer, and that was our main streaming machine, and we saved everything on there. We ran out of space, put it on an external hard drive, backed it up on another computer. Then in 2011, we did the same exact process. So we have 2009, 2010, 2011 all spread apart on 4 different computers. I
don't remember what year it was, but some years ago, I remember I went to my wife and I said, look, this is going to be very expensive, but we have all of our personal data and all of our professional data is on these hard drives. And if our house burns down or we get, robbed or whatever, it's gone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose it. So I bought 1 terabyte, which at the time was like crazy, Lacy big disk hard drives, $1,000 a piece.
Wow.
And I used them. I bought a it was FireWire, FireWire 800. So FireWire 800 was not and is still not common on PCs. And so I bought a card, for the inside of the server to attach these things. And I would manually back up to these drives once a month. And I would leave one at my parents' house. And then I would swap them out. So there was always one here, one there. And I would do this every month because I was just, this is before cloud computing was viable as a offsite backup. Because that was the only way to do it. It was very expensive. Like I said, it was $2,000. It was, it's like inconceivable amount of money. Except that if I lost, my hard drive, if my home or whatever server it was at the time, it wasn't home server. It was actually before home server. But if that server ever died or was stolen, that was the end of that. And I just wanted to make sure the stuff was redundant.
And it's kind of so easy now.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
now
a lot easier now.
Yeah.
A lot cheaper, of course.
Well, storage, I mean, especially online storages. You look at services like Carbonite, and they're not an advertiser here at the network. I know they advertise with Windows Weekly occasionally.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal service, and it's not expensive. If you think about the fact that you're taking your data.
Now, I happen to use something different because I use something that works specifically with home server. This is supported and works with a server. But Crash Plane, yeah.
But they're not. I mean, and you could go with another. They just came to mind. You could even create your own server. I mean, we do that with GoDaddy. We have a GoDaddy server, and we just put stuff on there that we want in the cloud.
Yeah,
it's very easy and inexpensive.
By the way, so you have extreme data needs, right? I have.
Yeah, we go about 10 gigs a show. Each show is about 10 gigs.
That's crazy. So I have pretty big data needs as well, unfortunately. But for people coming up into the world now, into technology, you can bypass a lot of stuff. I've been experimenting with Evernote, for example, and Evernote is something that you can just store everything up in the cloud and then access it from whatever client. So I can write blog posts and articles in Evernote, just leave them in Evernote, cut and paste from there to the web forms they use to get stuff online, and it works. And when you do that, there's nothing on the computer anymore.
Yeah.
It's weird because there's no need to back it up to a home server or whatever. Now, I'm trusting that Evernote will exist 2 years from now. And that's a big if, isn't it?
But the odds are that it will. I mean, that's...
I hope so. I mean, and, I don't know. So it's one of those things where you want to be able to trust these companies. And it's one of the reasons I've moved a little slowly into some of the cloud stuff. I wish that Microsoft had gotten its act together years ago with SkyDrive. And I wish they had offered a way to pay for extra storage. And because I trust Microsoft, and I would have put my stuff on their servers and would have trusted them to back it up correctly and all that kind of stuff. I trust Google to do this, but they don't have good interfaces for anything other than photos currently, although that may change in the future. I trust Amazon, but for consumers, the cloud drive stuff, they don't have any interfaces for anything other than music. Their music interface is very good. You can get stuff into their cloud, like documents and so forth. It's just not very easy.
Yeah.
And that's the key. You want something that works with what you're using and is seamless.
I have one more for the year, and I want to pick Intel. And the reason why I want to pick Intel is that they have, and AMD next week will be my flop of the year. And I have many reasons why, but Intel is really, if you look at the CPU and what it's become over the last 5 years, it's phenomenal the speeds you are getting out of these chips now. And they're not that expensive. I mean, you could get a 6-core Intel, which is equivalent to a 12-core, really with that hyper-threading, for $300, under $500. And the speed that you're able to get is, I mean, mind-blowing, the performance. And it's become so inexpensive when you compare it to what it used to be, especially with video cards and RAM. Just components in general have become extremely inexpensive. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that more, we're producing more, the demand is more. I'm sure it's a combination of everything. But you're seeing i7s in everything at this point. And if you look back a couple of years ago, in order to build a super high-end machine, you kind of had to do it on your own. You couldn't go to Dell and get the highest gaming machine.
Right.
And I really owe it to Intel because they've become very aggressive with the way that they're marketing these chips, and even the lower-end i5s are extremely fast when you look at the technology. And if you look at mobile, these Ivy Bridge chipsets are going to kind of lead the future into this extremely fast and extremely powerful, slim computer. Now, what does that mean for the desktop in 2012? That's the question. Because the market share is dropping tremendously for desktops.
Right. Well, but they're the trucks. There'll always be some people like you and me, I guess, that need trucks. These big honking PCs.
But Intel had a phenomenal year. I mean, they started off. If you wanted a high-end i7, it was $1,000, and now the latest one is.
This is the market is where it was when I kind of entered the PC market. I remember I built my first PC. I'd have to guess the year. It was probably 94, 93, 94, somewhere there. And at the time, AMD and I think it was one other company, but AMD was, kind of like the low quality, low cost, low end of the market. It was like a 386SX type chip from AMD. And that's what they did. They were kind of the low end. They were there for, if you wanted to save money, you would buy an AMD. And AMD went through an interesting transformation over the years. That there was, they innovated with the x64 stuff.
And they were dominant for a while. I mean, they were very
beating
competitive.
Intel from a performance standpoint. They did multi-core. I don't know.
And Paul, they not only performance but pricing. They were beating them. I mean, if you took that again for the time, let's say when 2002, 2003, 2004, they really were controlling that market as far as pricing goes.
I think the beginning of the end for AMD was the Core chipset.
Yeah, that
came out of Israel and then eventually replaced the Pentium stuff and is the basis for what we're using today. They went to Core 2 and Core 2, what they call the Core 2 Solo and Duo, and then there was a quad version, quad core processor. Then they added Hyper-V back to it, and then added additional capabilities. And now we have the the i5, the i7, second generation, and the third generation coming next year. So, Intel like Microsoft, I think needs to be scared a little bit to do their best work, and
they got that. I mean, but in the mobile platform, I mean, in mobile they're getting their butt kicked right now with Ultra Mobile. When I'm talking about phones and tablets, ARM is controlling that market currently. But I would love to see what they're going to do in 2012 because that is the future of computing.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't a wash. I'm going to be very curious to see what that stuff looks like this time next year. What we have available for Windows 8 slates in particular, and see what the difference is.
And for the next couple of weeks, again, I want to remind our viewers as we wrap up. This week was the best of. Next week is the fun show. It's the worst of the year. Things that Paul and I hate. And bad stories. So I'm sure HP is going to be in there, and we're going to discuss it. And I'll will be drinking.
The laptop I bought and returned. Actually, there were two this year.
Last year, by the way, I bought an HP Mini I think it was the 110 or the 210 mini. I had it for about 3 hours, and I went back. I said, this is just a piece of crap.
I bought an Inspiron Duo, the Dell thing, with the flip around.
Oh, you got it? I was about to buy that too. That's funny.
Epic piece of crap.
So we're gonna have a lot of these, and I encourage our viewers to participate in the crappiness of next week's show. Send me an email at guysfromqueens@gmail.com or tweet me. You could tweet the network at GFQ Network. You could tweet Paul at The Rot. You could tweet me personally at Andrew Zarian. It's going to be a fun show, and we want to involve the viewers. The week after, I guess that's the last show of 2011, will be Paul and I's wish list and things we hope to see and wish to see develop in 2012. And there'll be a lot there. I think we'll discuss the televisions in that sense, because according to Google, they're going to control the entire market with Google TV. That's what they said at Le Web. Every TV will have
the most important technology conference of the year.
Every TV, every single TV will have Google TV in it. So we're going to have that. The next couple weeks are going to be fun for the show because it's the end of the year. You got to enjoy it. One more thing about the AMD stuff, and then we're gonna go into this next week. I had an opportunity to use their brand new chipset, that Bulldozer chipset, and it's an 8-core processor, and they do something like hyper-threading. So the way it was described to me is that it's not necessarily hyper-threading, but it is hyper-threading, and it's equivalent to 16 whatever. Mm-hmm. It was my quad-core i7 runs laps around this thing. I mean, and it's nearly embarrassing for AMD how fast the i7 is compared to this. I mean, and the thing is hot, Paul. That chipset, that AMD chip gets hot. The thing was at like 80 Celsius or centigrade, whatever it's measuring at that point. I think it was Celsius. Yeah, it's Celsius. And the AMD, the Intel's at like 40. So I actually had a chance to do a side by side, and it's mind blowing how fast these Intel chipsets are. Really fast. Yeah. And that was my chip talk of the day. Tune in next week.
You're going to hear from the AMD fans.
You know what? I've heard from AMD fans. I've heard from Google because they weren't upset with something I said. That was actually for, you know what? That was the best moment of 2011 for me. Getting contacted by Google PR.
Really?
Yeah. Very interesting.
I've only been contacted by Google PR once, and it was actually a fairly positive interaction.
No, it was about Google. It was actually about Google TV.
And
they sent me a Google TV.
Right.
Because I proceeded to bash them repeatedly in a actual print article.
So they haven't repeated that, huh?
No. I after that, once I got that TV, I'll tell you, I just kissed their butt the entire time.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. That was a highlight of my career so far, and also my video about checking out Siri and asking for escorts on Siri.
Yeah.
On my wife's phone. That got picked up too all over the place.
Oh,
so that was interesting. Yeah. But interesting year. Next week is the worst of 2011. Should be a lot of fun. Paul, I thank you once again for showing up and not running away midway through the show. It is not something I'm used to at this point for people to stick around, but people can check you out at winsupersite.com.
I didn't realize there were other options, but okay.
winsupersite.com, great site. I've become a regular of the site over the last couple of months, and I really enjoy the articles. Latest article is Attack of the Microsoft iOS app, Part 2. So this should be very interesting, and this is something that we discussed on the show about how they are going in iOS. Also, check out Paul every Thursday on the Twit Network for Windows Weekly at 2 p.m. East, 11 p.m. Pacific, and whatever time you're in. You could take a look. And that's it for this week, guys. Thanks again, and send us an email again, guysfromqueens@gmail.com. I encourage it, and see you next week. Good night.